Hello and welcome. Around the day three of the protests in Nigeria against bad governance, against the hunger in the land is too much, and bad economic policy, just everything that the protesters, complained about. Around the day three, things started taking a very strange turn, which was around the time we started seeing Russian flags popping up among the protesters and even in some locations being planted on some buildings and the rest. So at that point, it became very worrisome. And by day five, which was like Monday, that was Saturday, and by Monday, the president had to call a Security Council meeting wherein the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, had to address press conference with his Chief of Naval Staff and Chief of Air Staff and Chief of Army Staff, to emphatically, tell the people that that action of raising a foreign flag within the country is a treasonable offense. And that the people that were sewing the flags and the people that were sponsoring the sewing the flags and all these things are being investigated, they are being sought, and potentially when they are apprehended, they will be dealt with the full weight of the law, things along those lines. So that made me think that, is it a crime? Is it actually a treasonable offense to fly a foreign flag within a country? And from all I have found, or all I could research and try to investigate, is that it is not a crime by itself to fly a foreign flag in a country. I mean, during Olympics, so many flags are flown. During in some business premises like hotels, schools, foreign flags are flown. If you go to Nigerian Ghana International School, you see Ghanaian flag on the flagpole and everything. So it is not a crime by itself to fly a foreign flag in a country. What is the crime there is the context in which it is flown. In this context, it was around the same time that these flags were flown that another thing started coming up, the agitation that Tinubu should step down and Atiku should take over and, things like that. So when you put all that together, it's starting to look like the protest, which had become a riot, is now looking like it's becoming something even worse than that. Because at that point, it's now going from complaints by the masses for better governance and better living condition, is now turning to a political issue, and not just a national political issue. It's now taking an international dimension. So definitely at that point, the government had to step in, that there are limits to everything. So for me, I think it is really wrong and it is really a bad undertone. It's like crossing the red line to now start having international dimension to the protest, or even political dimension to the protest. If you have things to complain about, you complain, you protest, which is legitimate. But when you start taking other interests, then it becomes something else. But the other thing that we need to still question is the fact that, why the Russian flag? Why Russia in particular? You see, the world currently is in a turmoil. There is a lot of tension globally, from the Middle East to Europe itself, between Russia, Ukraine, to what America is doing in the Southeast Asia, in the South China Sea, between Taiwan and China itself. There is a lot of tension in the world. And in Africa also, a lot of countries have kicked out the West, America, France, even in the north of Nigeria. Niger Republic kicked out France and America to bring in Russia. In fact, when America did not leave on time, they gave Russian machineries or Russian forces the permission to stay on the base, because America could not believe that people are calling for Russia to come in to the country that they believed they were protecting, And similar thing happened in Mali, in Burkina Faso. So why Russia? What is actually happening? To the best of my understanding, there is a serious clash of West versus East, or at economic level, capitalism versus socialism kind of mentality. Because many countries in Africa and across the world, what they generally call the global south, had been had been reliant on the West. They had thought the West, with their advancement in technology and education, could help other countries grow. But very quickly, many countries are finding out that the West would not help you to grow. They still see the West, to a large extent, especially America and in Western Europe, still see a large part of the world as their colonial, their previous, their like a post. You see them within the third world entities, and even though they do not colonize a lot of countries and regions directly, they still view a lot of these places as their stooges, as their resource grounds where they harvest human resources, where they harvest natural resources for cheap and use it in their country, and then keep increasing and maintaining that gap between the first world, the so-called first world, and the third world country, or essentially the West and the rest of the world, essentially. So the countries that have been able to stand up to the West, led by America, essentially, has been countries like Russia, which after the whole Cold War, post-World War One and everything, it was people like Russia that could really stand toe to toe with them. That's the USSR, and then it broke up to remain the Russia now. That was like the country that could stand toe to toe with them. So for a lot of countries now, they are finding more help, more support for their growth, for their security, for their economic growth, for their agricultural food security, energy security in the East, in places like China, in places like Russia, than they are finding in places like America, England, UK, France, and the rest of them. So it's globally, there is a big shift towards these Eastern countries led by China and Russia. But Russia is like is the main big power that is ready to support countries and governments militarily. While China is available to borrow you money, no questions asked, as long as you are the government in power, Russia is ready to provide military support for you, no questions asked, as long as you are the one in government. So that's why you could have the Burkina Faso bringing, going. Russia is like their go-to guy now after they kicked out America and France and all of them from the whole Sahel or the West African countries. So Russia is the one that is available to support you militarily. But to be fair to Russia, they've largely also been supporting governments in power in many of these places through their Wagner machineries and things like that. So what I see there is, from military point of view, these people are probably showing Russia from the point of Russia, come and help us to overthrow the government, which is why the thing is completely condemnable and it's just pure red line and should not, be done. But the truth of the matter is, people are tired of Western-oriented ideologies. If you look at President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he's a capitalist by training. He was trained by the West. He schooled in the West. He worked with ExxonMobil as a chief executive before resigning and going into politics and the rest. So he has a very capitalistic mindset in the way he looks at economic and national development. And that is why you see him coming that, okay, would increase the fees in schools and then give students loans to be able to pay those fees. But those that do not qualify for the loans, sorry, sort yourself, or you don't need to come to the school kind of mentality. But if you are able to get the loan, then you get to pay. But the school fees would be quite high. And that's, some of this economic policy, that's why he believes subsidy just has to go on day one of it, because he doesn't believe in welfare. He doesn't believe so much in welfare. He believes so much in productivity, what you give is what you get, survival of the fittest kind of thing. And those policies, while they might be good in some places, a lot of things need to have been provided on ground before you just take those Western capitalistic mindsets to put in a place like Nigeria, where some basic things are not in place. So the ground is not leveled. The gap between the haves and the have-nots are so wide that if you say everybody should compete and it's a survival of the fittest, whoever can perform best in the marketplace should, win. you create a very lopsided kind of economy that could be quite explosive, quite volatile, which is what I think we're seeing. So I think, apart from, while I don't know who might be politically behind the whole showing the flags, flying the flags of Russia and things like that. But from general mindsets, a lot of people, even a lot of countries, are moving away from capitalistic mindsets, from the West kind of transactions towards the China-Russia axis. Like if you see the expansion of the BRICS countries, a lot of countries now they are ganging up in the BRICS network to counter the oppressive, essentially oppressive nature of the Western powers that still see a lot of the countries, a lot of poor countries, as like their past colonial colonies, essentially. So one thing is, the political side. The other thing is the economic yearnings of the people. So probably President Tinubu needs to look at the economic side of that, dynamics. Then the other thing about the interaction is, if you remember from security side, how difficult it was for President Jonathan, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, to get the ammunitions at the early stages of the Boko Haram insurgency, where it was obvious that like if you take the Chibok girls case, for example, they abducted the girls and ran into the desert, or just like ran away. But it's difficult for the Nigerian army to chase many of these people immediately they go off the road. Because they could lay ambushes, there could be a lot of things. The Nigerian army did not know. So it was very important to have military equipment like drones, like close air support helicopter, gunships that could go after them without being on the road, because mines and traps could have been laid on the road. And President Jonathan was waiting on the America, on the US government, on the West for support till the situation became so bad. And it was one of the reasons President Jonathan was not, re-elected, and the whole insurgency became blown up and everything. So a lot of countries have seen that the West does not always help you at your critical time of need. Even at that time, they could hold your feet to fire. They could hold you. That's why you're not supporting some rights, some gender rights, and this rights and that rights. So those kind of conversation they would bring up at your point of need. These are some of the things that make a lot of countries to be wary of relying on the Western world, or on America especially, because they will use all those things to influence you. They could say, because you don't support XYZ, maybe they have a policy in the UN. If you don't support it, then if you have people that are on a medication that they have, maybe like HIV, antiretroviral drugs, they could say they will stop giving you those drugs when they know millions of your citizens are reliant on those drugs. They will threaten that they will stop giving those millions those drugs, knowing that you don't have option if you don't support them in some of the policies or the global directions that they want. So that has made a lot of countries to be, skeptical about being too reliant on the West, but now maybe like having a mix of both worlds. So I think, while it was definitely wrong, but from economic and diversification point of view, I would think the Nigerian government, led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, would look at the underlying concept, or the underlying need for us not to go heavily capitalistic, because that can really create a lot, can worsen the lot of the masses that are not educated, that do not understand, that do not have the capacity and the capabilities to compete in a free market, economy like that. A lot of societies subsidize a lot of things for the poorest, which typically will be something that will be difficult to implement in a 100% capitalistic environment. So I think this is a warning, or a call. What do they call that? This is a food for thought, and a call for the president to look at how to deal with the masses without being so elitist or capitalistic, in a manner that leaves the masses out of development and growth of the country. That's my thoughts on the whole Russian flag being flown in the country. I think it's wrong. I think it's a red line that should not be permitted. While on the other hand, I wish the government would be more sensitive to the welfare of the masses, find a way to juggle between the welfare of the masses and the need to preserve our sovereignty. My name is Jibril Ibrahim. I'll see you in the next one.